Hi everyone, my name is Good News Sandy and I'm going to walk you through on how to replicate the Google homepage. That's for the Google tags. So we've noticed that some participants still have challenges completing the Google tags. So this tutorial is to walk you through on how to go about it. Let's start by checking the Google homepage, and on the homepage we have Gmail, the images and these two icons on the top, which are headers. And on the main body of the page, we have this Google image, we have the input field, we have these two buttons, and on the footer, we have Nigeria and other content below. Okay, so I will start by creating a folder on my desktop, and I will call it Google Tags. Feel free to name yours whatever you like. And I'm going to right click and open it with VS Code. Okay, so it's open here on my editor, and I will add a file to it called index.html. I will add a second file to it called style.css, where I will put my styling. So in the index.html, I have to set it up so that the browser can interpret this file as an HTML file. And the important setup is the doc type HTML setup, but there are other setups that are equally relevant too, so that the browser can interpret this file. And there's a shortcode for it, a kind of snippet, Shift 1 to get the exclamation mark, and I enter. And we have all these tags that are very important for the browser to interpret this file. Okay, so the first one is important. The second one is telling the browser that we want this to be in English. The head tag contains some important meta tags, that's just settings for the browser. And we have the title tag, which is, you can change that to whatever you want. I'm going to change mine to Google tags. Okay, so I'm going to add another tag called the link tag so that I can link my CSS to the index HTML. I'm going to use this code, style sheet, the path href, style.css. So I've connected my CSS file to my index HTML file now, and whatever styling I put here will take effect on the index HTML file. So I'm going to start to add my codes in the body tag, in between the body tag. You have to ensure that your codes are written in between the body tags. So I'm going to start with the header. So I have the header tag, and in the header tag, I have a tag called nav, which is a short form for navigation. And we have here these are anchor tags. Why? Because when you click on it, it should load to other pages. Okay, so we use the anchor tags for that, which is a tag. I have Gmail here and images. Okay, and I can add this attribute where I would want it to load to other pages, but for our case, we don't want it to load to anywhere. So I would use the hash to stop that, stop it from loading to anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to open this using Live Server. I'm going to open it on my browser using Live Server, and this is what we have there. So Live Server is an extension. We click here to take you to Extension Market, search for Live Server. Mine is already installed. So Live Server helps you to automatically refresh your browser. I don't have to come here and refresh every time I save my work on the VS Code. So mine is already installed. It's a very good extension that helps you to work efficiently. So I have this here now. So we want this to move to the right hand side, and it shouldn't be blue in color, and the underline there shouldn't be there. It's blue in color because it should be a link to somewhere. So when we use the anchor text, the default format is blue in color. So we're going to style it. So I'm going to target the nav, which is the container for the anchor text. And I want the container to go to the right hand side. So I'm going to use a style called display flex and justify content space around. This is what's going to happen. Okay, so this is what space justify content does, gives it a little bit of space. Okay, so I'm going to add width 20% to close up the space and a margin left also so that it goes to the right hand side. So we have this here. Okay, and I want to make the color black and remove the underline effect there. So I'm going to target the anchor link. So this is a container and the anchor link is in the container called nav. So I target the container and the tag itself. So I'm going to change the color to black and text the correction to be none because I want to move that underline thing under it. Okay, it's better. The next thing to do would be okay, we have these two icons here. I would tell you not to bother, but let's try to add one of the icons. The name of this one is Google Apps. So let's search for it on Google. Let's try and get an image of it. Google App icons 9 dots. You click on images, and we have some few images here. This one looks like it. So we're going to use this. So I'm going to, I just right click. Oh, sorry for that. I right click and I'm going to save my image directly on my project folder. So it's on the desktop and the name is Google Text. So I'm going to save it directly on my project folder. I call it Google Dots. You can name it whatever you like. I go to my editor and it should be there. It's there now. So I'm going to add an image tag and the source is this. And standard practices requires that you use the alternate attribute. You call it whatever you want. Attribute is just like a title, so in case the page is not loading, there's a title for the page, for the image rather. So I'm going to close that tag and let's see what we have there. Oh, this is it, and it's very big. So we have to reduce the height. So I'm going to target the nav again and the image that is in the nav. I'm going to give it a height of 20 pixel. So pixel, REM, percentage, they're all units of measurement. So, okay, this is much better and it's fine. So the next thing now we want to do is to work on the content, which is the main. So the content of the page, which is in the middle of the page. So we're going to work on that. So after the header, I'm going to add a tag called main. So main is where we have the content of the page, apart from the header and footer. So in the main, what I have there first is the image tag. That's to get the image. I have to get the image, the Google image. I'm going to search for it. logo image. Okay, I think this is fine, but it has space around it, so I don't want something with space. I think this will be fine. I'm going to save it directly on my project folder. I'm going to call it Google image and save it to my project folder. It's there now. So I'm going to bring it in using the source attribute, the image tag. This is it. And use the alternate attributes too, that it knows that's an image. And I'm going to add the input field. So for my input field, the text expected there is the type that is expected is a text. So I'm not going to type in a number, is a text. So I use the attribute called xtype text. Okay, and that should be it. I close the tag. And the next one should be the button. And I'm going to have a container for the button. I'm going to use a div, and I'll then have the buttons inside the div container. So I'm going to give a class to this div, call it buttons container. You can call it whatever you like. For my first button, what is there is Google search, and the second one is I'm feeling lucky. Okay, but let's see what we have on the browser. I'm sure with this. Okay, this is what we have on the browser. And we want this to be at the center of the page. So we go to style it. The main, I want to give it a width of 50%. Margin auto. Margin auto means that I want equal spacing for the left and right. Okay. And I'm going to start my input field. So I'm going to give it a width of 80% and padding so that there'll be some space inside the input field. I'm going to give it a padding of 1 EM. Okay. And I need to use text align on the main so that the content will all be centered. Text align centered will make all the content centered. Okay. So on the input field, I have to work on the edges to make it curved. So that's for the input field. And I'm going to use border radius to do that. Border radius, let me use 30 pixel. Feel free to play around the styles. I think this is fine. And the border is too thick. We have to make it a little bit thin. So I'll use border 1 pixel solid gray. Okay, getting better. So for the buttons, it's in the container called buttons container. So and the class, since it's a class, I'm going to start with a dot, then the name of the class. I'm going to use margin top to give it a little bit of space away from the input field. I'm going to give a margin top of 1 EM. Oh, that's much better. And then I'm going to style the buttons itself. I'm going to use the container where it is, then target the button. And for the button, I'll give it a padding so there'll be a little space inside there. Let's see. Okay, so we shouldn't have borders around it. So I'm going to remove the border. I'm going to use border none. to remove the black border around.